Deconverted man here. I was mentioned, thus I am summoned to this video. Here it is, this video. Alright, so I was mentioned in the comments here, or in the description, way down here, Deconverted man, who actually made a video debunking the previous one. There I am. Yay! That's me. So because I was mentioned, here I am, looking at this video. God, atheism, the burden of proof, the do-over by reality insights. Now, last time I did a video about his video, which is not this video. That video was God, atheism, the burden of proof, and it was 8 minutes long, 8 minutes and 32 seconds long, and yeah, I ate that one pretty good, and he admits that I ate it really good, and he's like, yeah, so I gotta redo that. Not just because of me, though. Like, there's other people, but mostly me. Okay, that's gonna be my story in my brain. Okay, anyways. So he does this video, and it's long, and it would take me like 9,001 years to cover it, because it's so long. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to talk about it, like, broadly, some of the ideas he has and stuff. Because he goes over what is atheism, the presumption of atheism, and then asks the question, do atheists have the burden of proof? So that first part is like the history of the word atheist, what people thought atheist meant, how different groups that called themselves atheists did things or whatever. It's history. I skipped through most of it. I'm like, okay, yeah, none of this really applies to me, so I don't care. Skip, pretty much, Then the presumption of atheism, like, it's like, do we think we're right? Like, what is the presumption? Like, what does that mean? And he covers that. He does a decent enough job. I don't really have anything much to say. Well, that's not true. Because this graph appears, and like, he's got etymology and epistemology, and, it's like, the differences there. And, like, this applies to some versions of things that an atheist might think or say, but not all. Just like with theism, it's complicated and nuanced, and he goes to great lengths to try to fix the natural language problem of the word atheist, but he can't fix it because it's unfixable. Because you can't fix natural language. The word means whatever the bleep people want it to mean, and today, pretty much, it means we don't believe in God. Which God? Whatever God you got. Whatever you think God is, whatever you want to claim it is, we don't believe in it. That's it. So, none of this really applies anymore to me or most atheists. But, yeah, he's thinking through it, and good for him, all right, great. Not much to do there, and a lot of different people and, stuff, and different quotes, and, so then he explains this thing that I thought was kind of interesting. Like, he said that if you lack a belief in God, that's pretty big. Just like you wouldn't believe in the Loch Ness monster, unicorns, Bigfoot, or Thor, the god of thunder. I usually say goblins, ogres, and dragons. That way I can abbreviate it as God. Anyway, so he says, if the person says that the Loch Ness monster isn't real, then they have the burden of proof. And you know what? I agree. Whoever makes the claim has the burden of proof. Yeah, I actually agree. So yeah, good job. I think it's kind of silly that, how would you do this is another question, but, that's how burden of proof works, But then he gives a couple other reasons. He says, courtesy, it's right to assume the other person has the least of them good and sensible reasons for believing what they do. Well, I'm not a courteous person, so I'm not going to do that. Um, and then what was the second reason? Come on, pop on the screen here. So what? No, what happened there? What? Uh-oh. See? Okay. Stress testing. It tests your own position and fundamental assumptions about the universe. I don't need to do that. I've already done that many times, and I'm right. So there you go. There's no God. Thanks for watching, everybody. Go back to bed now. Okay, so this is in regards to, the do atheists have the burden of proof, which I would say, well, actually, it depends, because it just depends. It depends what you're doing. Now, I think I don't know if he studied informal and or formal logic yet. He talked about liking history and not liking philosophy, so I don't know if he's specifically studied informal logic, or if he did and forgot this bit. I mean, who knows? I don't know. Okay, so there is a difference, and he seems to be, how do I put this, confused about the difference, maybe. Because it even goes back to that chart that we had up there. Now we're not listening to you because the music's a little. There's music. It's low, but it's in the background and it's constant and it's annoying. And I just want it gone. Like, I want it so low I can barely hear it, or it's just gone. Just, you know what? Forget it. Don't have music. It's even better. Where was that graph that I showed? Okay, there it is. Yeah. So like this, he's got there we go. He's got, what you're, that I can know that God doesn't exist, like there. Like, well, it depends what the word God is. That's one problem. Like, you might think of a particular thing when you use the word God, but that's one of the problems that I have with God is I don't even know what it means. So certain types of God, I could say that I know that no logically incoherent version of God, it doesn't exist, because logically incoherent things cannot exist, or you break logic. So there you go. And the burden of proof is that logic can't be broken, or you have shenanigans and insane things go on. So that's bad. We don't want that, okay? So let's see. Belief. Where was the belief thing? Yeah, whatever. Okay, so screw it. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay, so if somebody believes in anything, whatever it is, this is the thing in logic that I was trying to get to, okay? Beliefs do not have the burden of proof. It's very, very important to remember this. And if somebody's like, well, how do you prove that? It's like, I'll explain it, but I'll say it again because it's so important. Belief statements have no burden at all, period. End of story. So it doesn't matter what the person says that they believe in, it carries no burden. Similarly, wow, I can't say words. Okay, whatever. Also like that, non-belief or unbelief statements also don't have a burden. If I don't believe in something, I also don't have the burden of proof, because I don't believe in it. Okay, whether it's belief or not belief, whatever that might be, carries no burden. If I say I believe in God, no burden of proof. If I say I don't believe in God, no burden of proof. The burden only comes when somebody asserts that something is or isn't. So if I say there is a God, then I have the burden of proof. If I say there isn't a God, then I have the burden of proof. But beliefs, no burden. Why? because belief, the problem with that word is it's something internal that's happening in your head. You're saying, I think that this is true. I cannot read your mind. There's no device that we have yet that I know of at any rate that can read minds. So I cannot know if you are lying or telling the truth. Thus, within logic, since I cannot know this thing, there cannot be a burden assigned to it because the social contract comes in play. If somebody says, I believe I ate dinner last night, you're like, okay, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. You could be wrong, you could be mistaken. You think that you did, and since it's a very mundane statement, maybe you probably ate dinner last night. In fact, if they say, I ate dinner last night, you'll probably believe them without a burden of proof, even though they made a statement that would require some proof to it. So there's that social contract, but that social contract is like logic says, I don't want to deal with that. That's over there. Yeah. So because logic's all about formulas and rigid systems and syllogisms and things like that, right? So we don't like the messiness of the social situation where we grant innocence to people until guilt is proven. Logic hates all, well, I shouldn't say logic hates because logic doesn't have emotion, but informal/formal logic just doesn't deal with that stuff. That's left to philosophy in general to deal with. It's like, how do I know that you believe blah, 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 blah? I don't know. Okay, so instead, the burden is fully upon whoever makes the claim, whatever that claim is. So then that comes back to shalamanaagan, which is what I've named this video. And the previous video was, do you believe in shalamanaagan, whatever. And I changed the spelling of it because it doesn't matter. The point is, if I ask you, do you believe in shalamanaagan, you'll probably say, what the bleep is shalamanaagan. Or you might say, no, I don't believe in that. You might say any number of things. You might not say anything at all. I don't know. Hey, Nicodemus and Buster Jangle, do you guys, girls and or robots, believe in shalamanaagan? Let me know in the chat and then later the comments below. And to you listening to this when it's a video, let me know if you believe in it. Well, how can you believe in something if you don't even know what it is, right? So that's a problem. So imagine I tell you, well, here's what it is, and you're like, okay, well, that's interesting, great. Now at least I know what the bleep it is. But then somebody else is like, hey, yeah, I also believe in shalamanaagan, but they say it's something completely different. And you're like, okay, well, I don't know which it is. It could be that, or it could be that. So it's a problem because they're using the same word and they mean different things by it. And that's what God is for the non-believer, broadly speaking. God is said to be X, Y, and Z. This group of people over here say it's X. That group of people over there say it's Z. Those people say it's Y. And I'm like, how do any of you know what it is in the first place? And I think that that's kind of summarized in the comments here. Frosted, who I see every now and again commenting on stuff, has been around for, I don't know, forever, and says this comment, and he's, says, you make the assumption that whatever you want to define as a deity is real. Of course, your definition lacks specificity to the point where we can easily insert any mythological imaginary thing to fill in the gaps with more verbosity. Using your own methodology, honestly, You would be required to accept these other explanations, but you won't. We call this dishonesty. And then secondly, you want to discredit you want others to discredit your assertions without offering the specificity needed to make a model, basically pointing that others can't discredit your weak assertions and shifting the burden of evidence. We don't have to point out the use fallacious logical argument as your only means of support for your assertions, nor do we need to show that your assertions are weak. You made an assertion, you failed to back it up, that's on you. Let's see you support your assertions with something other than fallacious logical argument. Otherwise, stop making the assertion. To what reality says, well, I don't know what the bleep you're talking about. So I said, well, I think he means this. If X equals God, where X could also equal God or dragon, what is X? So if a person thinks X is Z and they happen to agree with your own view of X, since you also think X is Z, and this is where he's using the Aquinas idea of God. So back here, he quotes from Aquinas or whatever, that's like, here's what that guy said God was. And that's basically what I think God is. So there you go. That's what God is. Okay, great. But why should I care? I don't care what he said. I don't care. I want to know what X is. I don't care what people think it is, although it's interesting. I do want to know what you think it is, but I want to know what it is. Okay? So rather than use whoever, we're asking the one that's making the claim about X, or God in this case, how you know that X is whatever the bleep it is. You don't need to name names. Just show the proof, the method of finding out that X is Z. And then for the second part, it's a bad argument, just fix it. Which I don't know that that's fair here, because this video in whole seems more like a sort of a history lesson / lesson in words and some philosophy. And, I listened through it. Like I said, I really don't have that many problems with it. I just think it needs a little bit more sharpening. And I think ultimately it comes back to this thing where, he mentioned he was a Christian. So he's got a particular type of belief. And I would like him to rewind in his mind, if he can, maybe he can't, to try to remember a point when he wasn't a Christian. Like, when did he first become a Christian? Now, I actually kind of remember it for me, but not really. I don't have a clear memory. I know that when I was like 8 or so, I asked for a Bible for Christmas because I wanted to be a Christian. Now, I don't think I understood what the bleep that meant at the time, but it's like, well, that's when I became a Christian, right? Because, like, I'm announcing I want to do this. And before that, I wasn't a Christian, and it wasn't until, I was a teenager where I took it more seriously, and then an adult that I took it even more seriously, that I really understood what it was that I was doing with any of that. But as a skeptic now, looking back, it's like, I didn't always have these beliefs. I had to be taught those ideas. So when people say that atheism's the null hypothesis, I think they're referring to somebody like Johnny Drive-By, who was always an atheist, because they didn't go to church. They didn't talk about God in his family. So it wasn't until later in life that he ever encountered God, this idea, and it's like, what the bleep is that? And people believe in this? What are you talking about? It's like this just foreign concept that makes no sense to him, and it still doesn't. As an adult, he's just like, he's interested in it, but it's like, this is just, I can't believe that people believe in this, and so that is what I think it's meant by the atheism's the default position, because he talks a little bit about that in the video as well, that if you weren't told about God, you probably wouldn't believe in God. Although you might, it's just you would not call it God, because humans somewhere at some point in time invented God. Someone somewhere invented a thing that later evolved into God over time. So left on our own, we'll invent a God eventually, but I think that at an individual level, um, it's unclear how many people would come up with some idea of God on their own if they were never introduced to God. And of course, you'd need a wide scale experiment to figure that sort of thing out. So you'd need a whole bunch of people that were told nothing about God and see how that civilization develops over many years. And now you're talking about, just, an insane experiment that lasts, generations to see what happens. And I suspect that there would be somebody that had an idea and said, hey, here's this idea, and that other people would latch on to that idea, and that it would grow and evolve over time, especially if the people met together or worked together. If you had the system that we have today in our modern society, the way that modern life works, I don't know that we would develop God, or if we did, it would be something very different than what we have in the past, because the past gods were invented out of tribalism, that we were tribes, we were mostly nomadic people, and so the ideas of God grew up along beside us as we, eventually got to the farming age. So, where you go back, 2,000 some odd years ago, a little bit before then, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and you get, the proto religion, you get religions before that. You get Zoroastrianism way back when. And you get, you go older you get, the more loose the religions are, the more ill-defined they are, because the people are spread out, and so the ideas are diffusive. And once we come together to tell the stories, and that's what makes the religion evolve. That's what makes the idea evolve. And so God evolves with us, and God is just an idea that we carry from generation to generation. Now, maybe that's true, and also there's an actual God, but I don't have any reason to think that there is an actual God, let alone know what the bleep God is supposed to be. I think that for many, God is an answer to a question of, why are we here, or how we got here. And so you have different ideas of that, and that usually requires some sort of creation story or legend or God or spirit or something that made things. Not always. I mean, it's different for every tribe and culture and throughout history. So this is a decent video for the most part. I'm not going to dislike it. I don't know that I can like it either, because, you get it, but also like, okay, great. Sometimes atheists have burden of proof. Yeah, I guess. But mostly we don't. And that, even if we did, it doesn't matter. Do your side first. That's what should matter. Like, forget about the other side. Just prove your side. That's the main thing. So if you think you have some reason that I should think that God is actual and more than just an idea that's evolved throughout time with us humans, then what is that? And if you don't, okay, fine. Then it is a belief. But don't ask me to prove that your God isn't. Unless you want to define what God is, and then I'll, depending on that, I might be able to show you why that God isn't if it's logically incoherent. So a logically incoherent being cannot exist. So if your God is logically incoherent, then it cannot exist. Okay, there you go. So I don't know. You have to tell me what you think God is. I would also like to know how you know what God is, but that's a separate question. And I don't think you're going to do either of those things. But you might. Who knows? You mentioned my name, so I was summoned. And there you go. I gave you some attention. Not as much as last time, maybe more. I don't know how long I went last time. But isn't that amazing? I'm able to go like 25 minutes and I didn't play any of your video at all. So I'll let you have the final words, just to be fair.
To conclude, in the early pages of his book, There Is a God, Flew briefly revisits his earlier essay on the presumption of atheism, having since become a theist himself. He gives an overview of some of the counter-arguments presented and reaffirms his original objective.
Oh, wait, I'm not sharing audio. We're going to pretend that I knew what I was doing.
Of their own worldview and fundamental assumptions. The burden of proof is a beneficial intellectual exercise for the atheist.
Here we go.
To conclude,
there we go.
In the early pages of his book, There Is a God, Flew briefly revisits his earlier essay on the presumption of atheism, having since become a theist himself. He gives an overview of some of the counter-arguments presented and reaffirms his original objective for it to be a procedural methodology, describing it as, at best, a methodological starting point, not an ontological conclusion. Flew, in many ways, was the perfect atheist. He developed and defended his atheism without fail for 6 decades. But then, presented with evidence that convinced him he was incorrect, he changed his mind. In his book, There Is a God, Flew recaps his earlier position on the presumption of atheism and describes the most compelling counter-arguments he encountered, which I did not have time to go through here.
Yeah, well, I said you had the final word, and so that was good enough. You got the final word in there. As far as Flew, I don't care what convinced him. It's not going to convince me because it's arguments. Arguments are great if they're valid and sound, but they need evidence. And evidence is something that I have found not to be a thing that any theist can offer as yet. By evidence, I mean empirical evidence, that is observed evidence, whether it's observed by the naked eye or by some sort of mechanism of some sort, or a repeatable test. You need to be able to test the thing and test it over again and see how it works. If you don't have those things, what do you got? If all you have is bad arguments, it's not going to convince me. And I can tell you, I've heard and read just about all the arguments. I'm pretty sure Flew had the same arguments. And for whatever reason, those convinced him. But they wouldn't convince me because I'll point out the fallacies in them. And the problem is, unless you have evidence, your argument's probably always going to have a fallacy or two. Unless it's a hypothetical syllogism, then, well, that's a whole different story. But then I just reject the hypothetical part. So what? All right. Well, anyways, that's all I got. I guess this time. Wait. What's? Wait. No. What am I? No. We're done.
In this video,
stop talking.
We're
done.
Is and its history.
Okay.
How different types of atheistic beliefs can be categorized.
Okay.
Why atheists believe they have no burden of proof.
Some
reasons why it can be argued that atheists do, or at the very least can, carry a burden of proof in some circumstances, and why it would be beneficial for them to do so. Firstly, that the burden of proof applies depending on how the belief or lack thereof is applied, not in the wording of how it is defined.
Why
if an atheist is seeking to convince someone else, then they carry the burden of proof whether or not they define themselves as
Okay,
merely
yeah, I
lacking
guess. I
belief.
mean, not.
Secondly, that accepting the burden of proof carries an element of courtesy in the discussion.
Yeah.
It is right to give the other person the benefit of the doubt with regard to their beliefs.
Yeah.
Thirdly, that accepting the burden of proof is a beneficial intellectual exercise for the atheist to test their own position and fundamental assumptions, even if they don't technically have to.
Okay, there we go. There. All right. I wanted to give him a little bit more time because I'm cool, but I also wanted to be funny at the end. So I was like, oh, how's that's what I did. All right, thanks for watching / listening and commenting on the video and sharing your ideas and interacting with me so I can interact with you and do that or else. That's it. Bye.